If your last name is on this list, your ancestor didn't just live in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. He rode in the most feared cavalry formation Europe ever produced, the one that broke armies 3 times its size and struck fear into the Ottoman Empire itself. These 10 rare Polish surnames trace directly back to the ranks, roles, and battlefield structure of the Winged Hussars, the husaria, and most of the families who carry them today have no idea what those names once meant on a charge line. Stay until number 1, because that surname belonged to the men who didn't just ride with the Hussars. They built the entire unit, funded it out of their own pocket, and answered to no one but the king. Number 10 sounds like a job you'd find in any medieval town. It wasn't. The men who held this role were the reason a hussar banner ever saw the enemy coming before it was too late. Number 10. Strażnik. The watchman, the guard, from the Polish word straż, to watch, to guard. At its simplest, this was a soldier posted along the frontier, the Kresy, watching for Tatar raiding parties and Ottoman advance scouts moving through the steppe. Hussar banners stationed further back could only respond if the Strażnik raised the alarm in time. But the word carried real range. At the top of the Commonwealth's military hierarchy sat the Strażnik Wielki Korony, the Grand Crown Guard, a senior command office held by men like Samuel Lastsch, a legendary 17th century cavalry commander, ranking just below the hetmans themselves, and responsible for the entire southeastern frontier's intelligence and defense. So depending on which Strażnik your family descends from, your name could trace to a lone sentry watching the horizon, or to one of the men who commanded the whole watch. If your name is Strażnik, your bloodline stood somewhere on that frontier, from the outermost sentry post to the command tent that decided where the hussars would ride. Number 9 carries the name of an entire stretch of land that existed for one purpose. Defending it meant living your whole life on a war footing. Number 9, Krasinski. Of the Kresy, from Kresy, the fortified eastern borderlands of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the frontier zone stretching toward modern Ukraine and Belarus. This wasn't ordinary countryside. It was contested ground, raided constantly by Crimean Tatars, and later fought over by Cossack uprisings and Ottoman incursions. Families who settled here lived permanently within reach of the hussar banners, stationed to blunt those raids, and the connection between Kresy families and cavalry service ran deep for generations. To be a Krasinski family meant your ancestors chose, or were assigned, to live in the one part of the Commonwealth where a horse and a saber weren't optional. If your name is Krasinski, your bloodline occupied the frontier itself, the buffer zone the Winged Hussars existed to defend. Number 8 belonged to a soldier who wasn't glamorous, wasn't famous, but without him, the Hussars simply couldn't have existed as a fighting force. Number 8, Pancerni, the armored one, from Panzers, armor. The Pancerni were medium-armored cavalry, less heavily equipped than the Hussars, but faster, cheaper to field, and essential for scouting, skirmishing, and holding the frontier day to day, while the Hussars waited for the decisive engagement. After the catastrophic Battle of Beito in 1652, where the Commonwealth lost most of its veteran field army, some Pancerni companions did transfer directly into Hussar banners to fill the immediate gap. But the honest long-term story runs the other way. Over the following decades, the Hussars actually shrank, falling from the vast majority of the Commonwealth's cavalry down to a small, expensive elite, while the Pancerni grew to become the backbone of the army, the ones actually holding the line year after year, while the Hussars became rarer and more ceremonial. If your name is Pancerni, your bloodline may not have been the flashiest force on the field, but it was very likely the one doing the fighting most often. Number 7 is named after the single weapon that made the Winged Hussars unstoppable, and unlike almost anything else about them, this weapon was real, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Number 7, Kopijnik, the Lancer, from Kopia, the Hussars' signature weapon. This wasn't an ordinary lance. It measured up to 20 feet, was hollow, built from two glued halves of fir wood, and often gilded. It shattered on impact by design, meaning a single well-aimed charge could punch through armor and then be discarded before close combat began. The copia was provided by the king or by the wealthy nobleman who owned the banner, not by the individual soldier, because it was simply too expensive and too specialized to expect an ordinary man to supply. A Kopijnik surname points directly at a family whose identity was built around this weapon, the one European militaries eventually studied and feared. If your name is Kopijnik, your bloodline carried the exact instrument that broke enemy formations at Kirchholm and Vienna. Number 6 is where I have to be honest with you, because genealogists still argue about where this name actually comes from. Number 6, Grotowski, possibly toponymic, from a village called Grotov, possibly rooted directly in grot, the forged steel point mounted on the tip of the copia. Both explanations are argued seriously in Polish genealogical research, and there isn't a clean answer. What is certain is that grot was the technical term for exactly the piece of steel that turned a wooden pole into a weapon capable of killing an armored man at a full gallop. Whether the surname started as a place name or a battlefield description, families carrying it were concentrated in regions where hussar banners were regularly raised and equipped. If your name is Grotowski, your bloodline may carry either a village's name or a weapon's name, and honestly, nobody can prove which one with total certainty. Number 5 is the one that connects most directly to the image everyone already knows the Winged Hussars for. Number 5, Skrzydłowski. Of the wing, from skrzydło, wing. Most families carrying this name trace back to villages literally called skrzydłów, so at its root, this is a toponymic surname, like most others ending in ski. But the word itself is the exact word used for the towering wooden wings, dyed to imitate laurel branches, that hussars mounted to their backplates, and that made a strange clattering roar during a charge, a sound some accounts say was designed to spook enemy horses. The wing connection to actual hussar service is thematic, not a documented bloodline, and I want to say that plainly rather than oversell it. But if your name is Skrzydłowski, you are carrying, word for word, the single most iconic piece of vocabulary in Polish military history. Number 4 held real tactical command on the battlefield, even though his commanding officer technically outranked him on paper. Number 4, Porucznik. Lieutenant. While the Rotmisters held the king's contract and the legal authority to raise a hussar banner, it was frequently the Porucznik who actually led the charge in person. Rotmistrze were often wealthy magnates managing multiple obligations, estates, and political duties, so day-to-day battlefield leadership fell to the Porucznik, the officer who trained with the men, rode with them, and made the split-second decisions that determined whether a charge broke the enemy line or broke against it. If your name is Porucznik, your bloodline held the position that turned a nobleman's paper authority into an actual battlefield victory. Number 3 carried the single most trusted object in the entire banner, and losing it meant permanent disgrace for everyone involved. Number 3, Chorąży. The standard bearer, the ensign from Chorągiew banner. This role was typically given to a promising young towarzysz, a rising nobleman singled out by the commander specifically for the honor. He carried the banner's flag into the charge itself, riding at the front, unarmored in the sense that he couldn't easily defend himself while holding the standard with both hands. If the Chorąży fell and the banner was captured, it wasn't just a loss of equipment. It was a mark of shame the entire company carried afterward. I'll be straight with you on this one. Chorąży survives today as a fairly well-established surname, carried by a couple thousand families across Poland, so it isn't as rare as some of the others on this list. But rare and meaningful aren't the same thing. Families who held this name once held one of the highest trust positions a young nobleman could earn before he'd proven himself in any other way. If your name is Chorąży, Your bloodline was trusted to carry the one object an entire unit's honor depended on. Number 2 isn't a rank attached to the hussars. It is, quite literally, the word for the hussar himself. Number 2, towarzish, companion. This was the formal title for a full hussar nobleman, a member of the Slachta wealthy enough to arm himself, his horse, and 2 to 5 retainers entirely at his own expense, all for the privilege of riding in the front rank. A towarzish answered to his rotmistrz, but addressed his fellow companions as equals, brother nobles bound by the same obligation and the same battlefield risk. Today, towarzyski more commonly just means sociable or companionable in everyday Polish, and most people carrying it are not literal hussar descendants. But the word-for-word overlap with the hussar's own title is real, and it's worth knowing that if your name is towarzish, you're not carrying a description of the hussars. You're carrying their actual name for themselves. And now, number 1. This name belonged to the man who didn't wait to be assigned to a hussar banner. He built one. Number 1. Rotmistrz. Captain. The rotmisters held a formal letter from the king authorizing him to raise a specific number of horses, typically 100 to 150, though wealthy magnates and hetmans could be required to field 200 or 300. He recruited towarzishi from among the local nobility, and the expectation was clear. As a landowner, he would personally help cover the enormous cost of arming, mounting, and maintaining the entire company, recovering his investment, if he was lucky, through pay and battlefield spoils. This wasn't a rank you were handed. It was a rank you paid for, administered, and staked your family's fortune on. If your name is Rotmistrz, your bloodline didn't just ride with the Winged Hussars. Your ancestor built the banner, funded the wings, and put his own name on the letter that brought an entire company of Poland's most feared cavalry into existence. 10 surnames, 10 corridors leading back through frontier watchposts, borderland estates, the armored companions who actually held the line, gilded lances, disputed village names, iconic wings, battlefield lieutenants, trusted standards, the hussar's own title, and the captains who built the banners from nothing. Your name is not decoration. It is a military record, written in a language most people stopped reading generations ago. And if your surname is on this list, somewhere in your family's deep past, there is an ancestor who stood in the straths, or rode with the copia lowered, or signed his own name to a letter from the king and paid for 100 horses out of his own estate. Drop your surname in the comments. Tell me if it's on this list, or tell me what you've always been told about where your name comes from. If you made it to the end of this video, subscribe for more. Every week, another name, another bloodline, another history nobody told you was yours.